Morning.
Good morning. My name is Ria. I'm a compulsive overeater and a bulimic. I'm really happy to be here. Happy that you're here. And I'm excited. We did it. We're at step 12. We made it through. So I'm excited for us. Good for us. Hold on one second. I'm just going to make someone the co-host. Thank you, Leah, for asking. I'm going to make you the co-host right now. Beautiful. Okay. So let's talk about step 12, right? Step 12 is having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. We tried to carry this message to compulsive overeaters who still suffer. So the wording here is very interesting, right? It's having had a spiritual experience as the result of these steps, not a result, the result, meaning this is the goal of what we've done here. They're not saying having had a spiritual awakening as a result, and now you're a size 4 and, everybody likes you and you're really rich now. That's not what's happening. Like the goal of this process is to have a spiritual experience. So that said, we then take that experience to share with other people who need help. So, and that, by the way, is how we keep and enlarge our own experience. It's sort of like a well, not that I'm like, a farmer or anything, but like if you have a well and the water doesn't recycle, it gets gummy and gross on the top. It needs to be refreshed, renewed. So we constantly have to be emptying out and filling back up, emptying out, filling back up. That's what this process is. Okay. So we're going to talk about chapter 7, working with others, which you can find on page 89 of your big book. These instructions are for people who have completed steps 1 through 9 and are working 10, 11, and 12 to the best of their ability every day. Okay. So the way I was taught is once you've started your amends process, you can then sponsor. As long as you're doing 10, 11, and 12 every day and being consistent with that. So now once we've had the spiritual experience, we can now focus on how we help other people. So let's talk about this. So they begin actually with a very clear instructions, right? Our 12th suggestion, the first paragraph on page 89. Carry this message to other alcoholics. You can help when no one else can. You can secure their confidence when others fail. Remember, they are very ill. So these people who wrote this book are talking with very practical experience, and they're using guidance that they got from Dr. Silkworth, because after Bill got sober, before he met Bob Wilson, he was going out and to bars and going to talk to alcoholics to try to get them to do this. The problem was he was leading with the God angle and going in and going, hey, I had this amazing spiritual experience and now I'm not drinking anymore. So most alcoholics in a bar have no interest in having a conversation about God or spirituality. So after a while, after I think something like a year and a half, he went back to Dr. Silkworth and was like, I'm not helping anybody. And Dr. Silkworth was like, maybe instead of leading with the God thing, start with the disease part. Talk about your experience, because you got to sell these people. Otherwise, they think you're just like, a crackpot who's trying to get them to go with God, which is what we're doing, but we got to lure them in first, right? So the angle here, before we get there, they also came in with a promise, because they have to sell us on going in and doing it too, right? So they say, second paragraph, life will take on new meaning. That's a promise. To watch people recover, to see them help others, to watch loneliness vanish, to see a fellowship grow up about you, to have a host of friends. This is an experience you must not miss. We know you will not want to miss it. Frequent contact with newcomers and with each other is the bright spot of our lives. That's a complete 180 from the bedevilments we read about on page 52, where we couldn't control our emotional natures. We were alone. We were lonely. We were sad. We had no real steady relationships. This is basically saying you get to build a whole new life and be surrounded by people all the time. And it's true. My closest friends are predominantly program people. It was the first time in my life after I came into this program that I had people to call and talk to about something. And to this day, it's still my number one community. Anyway, so let's continue. They talk about, so the one thing I'll say is that the experience of compulsive overeaters is not necessarily going to be the same for alcoholics. And compulsive overeaters and anorexics and anybody with, eating issues, it's going to be different in 2024 than it was in 1939, because they're talking about, if you don't know any alcoholics, you can go talk to a doctor, a minister, a priest, or a hospital. So I don't know about you, but I could throw a rock and hit like 3 alcoholics. Okay. Like they're everywhere. The other piece also is that there are a lot of people who are compulsive eaters, and I don't need to go very far to find them. Now, that said, if I genuinely don't know any, I just got to sort of keep my ear to the ground. I personally have never consulted with a doctor to try to find like live prospects, because I don't need to. Most people are just either coming in and they've heard of us and they want to know something. Or, for example, I'll give you an example. I was working, this is years ago. I was working as a teacher in a classroom, and the other teacher was somebody who was clearly struggling. And so I sort of watched and waited until I felt like, the time was right. And then I led with, yeah, I used to weigh 250 pounds. And she said, really? And I said, yeah, that line always gets people hook, line, and sinker, because then they want to go, how did you do it? And I don't share that information with just anyone. I share it with the people who I feel like need to know that, because then they will ask me how I did it. Because the idea here is that and as they say here, we're not leading with the God angle. We're starting with our own experience. That's what we're leading with. We have to lead with our experience. And that means I used to weigh such and such. I used to have a problem with food. And I can go into all of the things that I used to do, because there are lots of people who may have been overweight and then they lost weight. I mean, I was on YouTube the other day and there was this news story about this like B-list celebrity who lost 35 pounds. And like, that was the title of the entire piece. And I'm like, this is so bizarre. Like this is news, you know what I mean? That's not somebody who would be interested in that is not necessarily somebody that I need to talk to. Somebody who I need to talk to is someone who I see is dead in their eyes and can't stop eating. And it's not always necessarily the obese person. I made that mistake in the past, assuming that somebody who's obese is a compulsive overeater. That's not necessarily true. They might be a hard eater, or they might have a thyroid issue. My point is, my job is to make myself available, and people come. I never had to go out and find them. They're there. So that said, now we're on page 90. And this is a very important concept we're about to talk about, okay? When you discover a prospect for Alcoholics Anonymous, find out all you can about him. If he does not want to stop drinking, don't waste time trying to persuade him. You may spoil a later opportunity. This advice is given for his family also. They should be patient, realize they are dealing with a sick person. Okay, so first and foremost, Leah, do you mind just remuting everybody? Is that okay? First and foremost, what they're saying is you have to find out if they even want the solution. There are lots of people who are sort of like adjacent and want it, but they don't want it yet. Or they know that they need it, but they're not really ready to do anything about it. That's just where they are in their process. I have to gauge where they are first, because I can't put my energy into somebody who's not ready. It's not a judgment. It's not anything like that. It's saying, don't waste time trying to persuade someone. They're telling me that my time is valuable. My experience is valuable, and I have to give it to the live ones. Now, I don't have to work to convince somebody to work the steps. If they're ready to do it, they'll do it. I can tell the difference in that first conversation when someone calls me and they have a lot of excuses and reasons why they can't do it. And I don't judge them, because I had them myself. And the difference between that person and the person who calls me and says, tell me what to do and I'll do it, there's a world of difference there. Because I can give someone an assignment and I might not hear from them for 3 months. Or somebody who comes to me and says, tell me what to do and I'll do it. And I hear from them the next day going, okay, I did it. What's next? Because those people are on fire. Those are the people who are using my experience and my time and understand its value and are going to take it and run with it. That's the best place to put it. And it's not against anybody who's not ready yet. It's that I need to make sure that my time is being used most effectively. Okay, so let's talk more about this. If there's any indication that he wants to stop, have a good talk with the person most interested in him, usually his wife. So I have some thoughts about this. We'll get to that. You may need, okay, so we're going down to the bottom. You need this information to put yourself in his place, to see how you would like him to approach you if the tables were turned. The key here is really about being empathetic, understanding what they're going through, and tailoring your sales pitch to them. For example, I deal with all kinds of people. I had a sponsor who was like Roman Catholic. I've had people who are super religious Jewish. I've had people who are completely atheist. My point is, I need to know, like, culturally and personality wise, who this person is, so I know how to engage with them. Because I can talk about the Jewish angle with like Jewish people, but somebody who doesn't know about it, it's not going to speak to them. It really depends on the person. So I have to really understand where they're coming from. Sometimes, this is the third paragraph on page 90. Sometimes it's wise to wait until he goes on a binge. The family may object to this, but unless he is in a dangerous physical condition, it is better to risk it. Don't deal with him when he is very drunk, unless he is ugly and the family needs your help. Wait for the end of the spree, or at least for a lucid interval. Then let his family or a friend ask him if he wants to quit for good, and if he would go to any extreme to do so. That right there is the crux. Do you really want to stop? And are you willing to do anything to stop? Because that's the best place to be for these steps to work. If I'm willing to do, that's how it ended up working for me. The first time when I got abstinent, I went to the person who was my sponsor at the time and I said, tell me what to do. And she taught me how to eat. And from that day, I ate like that. And I still do. And then once I was miserable enough as an abstinent person, I went to somebody who was very well versed in the big book. And I said, I'm miserable. Tell me what to do. And I was on fire and I did exactly what she said. And I got the results. So that's where we want people to be. Are you willing to quit for good? And will you go to any extreme to do so? If they say yeah, if he says yes, then his attention should be drawn to you as a person who has recovered. You should be described to him as one of a fellowship who, as part of their own recovery, tries to help others and who will be glad to talk to him if he cares to see you. So what we're really doing here is giving people the gift of desperation. Sometimes I've had sponsees argue with me about something, and I don't mean argue. I mean, they push back on instructions that I've given them, and I'll say, don't do it. Don't do it. See what happens. And then they go and binge and they come back and they say, okay, they need to have that process of hitting a wall so that they come back and become more willing. It's why people call me and they ask me and they tell me where they're holding and they're not willing yet. And I say to them, and this sounds harsh, but I mean it, I pray for you to have enough pain and fast. Because the more acute your pain, the more willing, the more motivated you're going to be to get out of it. We are pain and pleasure motivated creatures, which means that if the pleasure of doing something is higher than the pain, I'm not going to stop. But when the pain is higher than the pleasure, then I'll be willing to stop. So I just always pray for the compulsive overeater or undereater or whoever that's out there, that their pain outweigh their pleasure as soon as possible, because that's how this is going to happen. Okay. So now they're talking a little bit about don't force yourself on people, let them, go through their own process, avoid meeting a man through his family. I know people through my own family, but I would never pitch them. I would never pitch them on this. They know what I do. I do not need to sit there and try to sell them. I have quietly waited for people in my family to call me for 20 years. Will they call me? I have no idea. Will they ever? Not my problem. They know, once in a while, like my brother or somebody would be like, do you still go to those meetings? And I'll be like, yeah. And, they know what I do. They know how I eat. It's not a big mystery. And they know where to find me when it's time. You know, I've had people on the other side of my family who have been to rehab and they don't call me. I know why, and that's okay. They don't want to hear, they're not ready to hear what I have to say to them yet. And that's okay. They can go back to rehab as many times as they want. And when they want to call me, I will be here. In the meantime, it says in the middle of page 91, he may be more receptive when depressed. It's that pain thing again, right? The more pain you're in, the more willing you are to do something to get out of it. So now we're going to be on page 91. So this is when we really have the first, let's say we have the first meeting with this person. Okay. Again, it really depends on how you meet them, what your relationship is. There are some people with whom you have instant rapport. Like, oh, not only do we have this overeating thing in common, we're also like I like you and we can like talk and we can be friends and it's easy and chit chat. Oh, really? You're like that? Yeah, I went through this. Fine. Then there are plenty of people I've worked with who I would never hang out with outside of a meeting. But it doesn't matter. If I'm meeting with them, this is the approach I need to take, okay? See your man alone if possible. This is the third full paragraph on page 91. At first, engage in general conversation. How are you? How's it going? What brought you here, et cetera, et cetera. After a while, turn the talk to some phase of drinking. Tell him about your drinking habits, symptoms, and experiences to encourage him to speak of himself, okay? We are not talking about them. We are not here to tell them what to do or interrogate them. We are here to say, this is what I am. This is what I did. These are the crazy things I did. Here's how I got better. Are you interested? And if they say yes, great. And then you move on to the next phase. If they're like, I don't really relate with that, you're like, great. I'm really glad we had this talk. Feel free to give me a buzz if you want. Like that's literally it. Because I cannot be personally invested in every single person getting better, or else I would be an extremely disappointed person. I've been sponsoring for over a decade, and I think I've had 5 people make it all the way through the steps. It's more common for people to drop out of sight than it is for them to finish. But I'm not invested. I want them to get better, but I know that my experience is supposed to be shared with someone who wants it. So if you want it, I'm here. Excellent. If you don't, got to move on. It's that simple. It does not have to be a rejection. I do not have to chase after people. I do not have to convince or persuade anyone. I'm here. I gotcha. If you want it, if you don't, I love you anyway. I got to go. Okay, so you give a sketch of your drinking career up to the time you quit, but say nothing for the moment of how that was accomplished. So we're not jumping into the how we did it part. We're just talking about the what I was like, because that's got to get their attention first. Similar to this book, they spend the first few chapters only talking about the disease of alcoholism. So that not only do they establish it as a disease, they convince and whoever's reading this that it's a hopeless malady that will kill you. And once somebody has really understood that and integrated it, they'll say, okay, so now what do I do about it? But you got to get that point home first. So say nothing for the moment of how that was accomplished. Right. Okay, so when he sees you know all about the drinking game, this is the last few lines of page 91, commence to describe yourself as an alcoholic and tell him how baffled you were, how you finally learned that you were sick. Give him an account of the struggles that made you stop. Show him the mental twist, which leads to the first drink of a spree. We suggest you do this as we have done it in the chapter on alcoholism, right? So I don't need to explain it in as much detail as these guys did because I have a book. So I can just tell people, go read more about alcoholism and then come back to me and we'll talk more about it. Because it explains it way better than I ever could. And they have the endorsement of a doctor. So I'm very big on having people read first. But the truth is, a lot of people come in already knowing, or I should say sensing that they can't stop, but no one's ever told them that because no doctor's ever going to tell you that. And certainly no diet, like Pay and Weigh Diet Club is going to tell you that. They're going to tell you, keep coming back and we'll make it work for you. No one's ever said to anyone, you can't stop this. In fact, there was a point in my life where I said to a professional, I can't stop. And they said, just don't eat that thing. And I was like, okay, so you're useless. What I'm trying to tell you is that I literally can't. So the person you're talking to will either resonate with that or they won't. And the people who resonate with that, those are the people you want. Okay. So now we're on page 92, second paragraph. Okay. If you are satisfied that he is a real alcoholic, begin to dwell on the hopeless feature of the malady. Show him from your own experience how the queer mental condition surrounding that first drink prevents normal functioning of the willpower. Okay. Don't at this stage refer to this book unless he has seen it and wishes to discuss it. And be careful not to brand him an alcoholic. Let him draw his own conclusion. I cannot tell someone else if they are an addict, a compulsive overeater, an alcoholic. It is not up to me. They have to decide it for themselves. This entire process has to be self-motivated. It's all about intrinsic motivation here. I cannot want for somebody else what they want for themselves. I cannot tell someone that they're an alcoholic. They have to know it. If they don't know it, there's nothing to be done. Okay, I came into my first meeting and it took me 2 years to really understand that I was a compulsive overeater. Once I got it though, it clicked and then I was ready. Other people need to come in here and they need to experiment for a little while. A lot of people know that they have to be here, but they don't know it. Until they know it, all you can do is let them continue to have their process. If they keep picking up, they have to keep picking up. However, I will say that if they do keep picking up, I think it's a waste of time to start pushing them through the steps. Because that means that they have not hit that place yet where they know that they are compulsive overeater, whatever, okay? They cannot, we have to admit our powerlessness. We have to understand that this is not a fight we're going to win. And if somebody is still on the fence about that, you're wasting your time trying to take them through the steps. Okay. So now we're on the bottom paragraph, page 92. Continue to talk of alcoholism as an illness, a fatal malady, right? Those death threats we talked about in the book. Feel free. Alcoholism kills people. Compulsive overeating kills people. Maybe not in the same, like, glamorous way, like choking on a sandwich is not so glamorous, but it does. And really it's a lot more painful in a lot of ways. A drunk driving accident that kills you on the spot. All right. I mean, it sucks, but it's pretty painless. But if I have to lose all my fingers on both hands and then I have a stroke and then I have diabetes and then I have a heart attack and then I can't walk and then I'm incontinent and then I finally die of cancer, that's not a fun way to live. So talk about the conditions of body and mind which accompany the malady, right? Keep his attention focused mainly on your personal experience. Explain that many are doomed who never realize their predicament. You're welcome to say alcoholics who don't get better will die, but they can't stop themselves. Now, this person that may terrify someone, but it needs to be said because no one's ever said it to them. Or they have, but that person could never really hear it. It's very different when somebody who is an alcoholic comes in and says the truth to them and says, but I got better. Because most, and they say it in this chapter that a doctor is not going to say to somebody, you're going to die because you can't stop, because they have no solution to give them. Whereas somebody like me, if I go to somebody and I say, listen, I used to throw up 8 times a day. I don't do that anymore. And if I continued doing it, it would have killed me. I almost died one night when I was purging. So and somebody can say to me, well, how did you stop? Well, I'm so glad you asked. That is a very different kind of conversation than I'm really sorry. There's nothing I can do for you. Goodbye. That's horrible, So now let's keep going. Right. Doctors are rightly loath to tell alcoholic patients the whole story unless it will serve some good purpose. But you may talk to him about the hopelessness of alcoholism because you offer a solution. That is the difference between me and everybody else out there. There were so many people who came up to me, well-meaning people. They really did mean well, who would come up to me and be like, you would be so beautiful if you just lost weight. Or, you might want to think about eating less. And I'm like, oh, really? Never occurred to me. These people meant well, but they had nothing to offer me. I went to the professionals. I went to the top people in the field and I told them what was going on. And all they had for me was just don't eat it. And I was just like, fuck, that's not going to happen. Not eating it is not going to happen. But if someone comes to me and says, yeah, I couldn't stop eating it either, but now I don't, now I'm interested. Now I want to know what they have to say. So it's a very different dynamic here because I am walking evidence that this thing works. And if you want it, you can have it if you do what I tell you to do. And I don't mean me, Ria. I mean, if you do this, it will work for you because exhibit A right here. Okay. So now we're going to move to the top of page 93. Okay. Even though your protege may not have entirely admitted his condition, he has become very curious to know how you got well. Let him ask you that question. They have to ask for it. You have to hear the words, how did you do it? Because if I jump in and go boom, without even finding out if they've hit that moment, I'm wasting my time. I'm wasting my breath. I want hungry, and I don't mean physically, although they might be at the time. I want hungry customers, okay? I want people who are like, yes, that's me. Please tell me what to do. Let's go. And how did you do that? Please tell me. I want to know. Okay. So now it says stress the spiritual feature freely. Once I've made my sales pitch and I have said, I was a compulsive overeater. I used to be extremely obese. I used to binge and purge multiple times a day, and I almost died, and I almost committed suicide. And somebody says to me, how did you not do that anymore? I say, well, why don't we sit down and have a talk about that? But I have to make a strong sales pitch first. Okay. This is following Dr. Silkworth's advice. Lead with my experience, then come in with the God thing when I know that they're ready. Okay. So now page 90, bottom paragraph, page 93. I really like this paragraph. Your prospect may belong to a religious denomination. His religious education and training may be far superior to yours. In that case, he is going to wonder how you can add anything to what he already knows. But he will be curious to learn why his own convictions have not worked and why yours seem to work so well. He may be an example of the truth that faith alone is insufficient. To be vital, faith must be accompanied by self-sacrifice and unselfish, constructive action. Let him see that you are not there to instruct him in religion. Admit that he probably knows more about it than you do, but call his attention to the fact that however deep his faith and knowledge, he could not have applied it or he would not drink. Okay, so this actually comes down to one sentence. How's that working for you? If somebody comes to me and says, because I've been to meetings, I live in Israel, right? So I've been to Jerusalem and there are people at the meet, I've gone to like AA meetings, and there are people there who are well-known teachers, very well-known rabbis, and they sit in this meeting, and these are very religious people, okay? Like if you looked at them, you'd be like, they don't have to say anything to you. You take one look at what they're wearing, you say, that's a religious person, okay? And I hear these people saying, yeah, on such and such holiday, I couldn't stop drinking. And then it went into the weekend and I couldn't stop drinking. And I just can't stop drinking. And I keep praying, but I can't stop drinking. I can't stop drinking. So if I have a prospect, and I've worked with people who are way more religious than I am in a variety of religions, and they say, yeah, well, I already do that. I already know that. And I say, and how's it working for you? They should be able to answer the question themselves. I am not devaluing what they do. It's important to them. It enriches their lives. But clearly it is not sufficient enough to help them stop compulsively eating, or it would have done it already. So in a very respectful way, it's, well, is it working? If it is, great. If it's not, then let's try something else. Okay. So now, let's go to page 94. Top full paragraph. Outline the program of action, explaining how you made a self-appraisal, how you straightened out your past, and why you are endeavoring to be helpful to him. It is important for him to realize that your attempt to pass this on to him plays a vital part in your own recovery. Actually, he may be helping you more than you are helping him. Make it plain he is under no obligation to you, that you hope only he will try to help other alcoholics when he escapes his own difficulties. Suggest how important it is that he place the welfare of other people ahead of his own. So when I have a conversation with a potential sponsee or just somebody who's coming in, I'm already grateful to them. Obviously I care where it goes, but I don't care if it sticks with them or not, because just by virtue of that conversation, I've ensured my own recovery for that day. I have put in the work. I am paying my insurance policy for my own recovery. It really doesn't matter whether they're interested or not. If they are, great. I have more to offer them. If they're not, that's fine. I did what I need to do for me today. So, you know, the reason I started this workshop is because a year ago when I was really struggling, I said, you know what, I need to give something away. And so that's why I did it. Whether any of you ever crack open a big book, whether any of you work the steps ever, I love you, but I don't care. If you do it, that's great. Happy to help. But if you don't, I'm not invested in whether or not you do. I'm doing this because I want to help so that my own recovery is insured for today. So thanks for coming and helping me do that. If you want to work the steps, you know where I am. Anyway, so that's the point. So now we're going to go, right. So now we're going down to the bottom paragraph on page 94. Your candidate may give reasons why he need not follow all of the program. He may rebel at the thought of a drastic house cleaning, which requires discussion with other people. Do not contradict such views. I'm not here to argue with anyone. Okay. If somebody says, I don't think I need to write a 4-step, I'll say, great, don't do it. See what happens. That's it. Tell him you once felt as he does, but you doubt whether you would have made much progress had you not taken action. So again, this person came to me and said, how did you do what you did? Well, I did this. Well, I don't want to do that. Okay, don't do it. But I did that, and this is what happened. If you don't want to do that, see what happens. It's an experiment. Go ahead. Let me know how it goes. So I'm not here to argue. I'm not here to convince. I'm not here to sell. I am here to help me. And I do that by going out and saying, this is what I have to offer. Do you want it or not? And if you don't, great. There's one of my favorite movies of all time is Singing in the Rain, starring Gene Kelly. If you haven't seen it, like when this meeting is over, go find it on Netflix. It's amazing. So best musical of all time. So there's this one part where Gene Kelly's dancing and he keeps going to these, he's a young, like dancer or whatever. So he's knocking on the first door, gotta dance. And he's a little dance around. And the agent says, nope, shuts the door in his face. And instead of getting devastated, Gene Kelly goes, okay, and goes to the next door. Gotta dance, and dances again, right? And the agent says, nope, shut the door in his face. And so he goes, okay, goes to the next door. And finally, that person takes him. So I want to be like Gene Kelly. I'm just going to knock on the door. Do you want it? No? Okay, off to the next one. Also, I just want to move like Gene Kelly. Damn. He had the moves. So anyway, here we go. So the next part, right. Okay, so now I'm looking at the 4th paragraph on page 95. That's the next page, okay? If he is sincerely interested and wants to see you again, ask him to read this book in the interval. After doing that, he must decide for himself whether he wants to go on, right? This is his decision. He has to decide. He should not be pushed or prodded by you, his wife, or his friends. If he is to find God, the desire must come from within. This is the most important thing. I cannot want for somebody else what they have to want for themselves. This has to come from here. They have to decide for themselves that they're compulsive eaters. They have to decide for themselves that they're ready to work the steps. And they have to decide for themselves that they're ready to really do this. Because there are people who want to do this, but they're not ready. We have to let people have their own process. When they are ready, it will happen. So if he thinks he can do the job some other way, this is the following paragraph, or prefers some other spiritual approach, encourage him to follow his own conscience. We have no monopoly on God. We merely have an approach that worked with us. But point out that we alcoholics have much in common and that you would like in any case to be friendly. Let it go with that. In other words, vaya con Dios. Okay? Go with God, enjoy, go test, go see, maybe you'll find something. You know, I know people who decided after talking with me, they go and get surgery, or they go and decide to give one of those pay and wait programs, the old college try again. Go for it. And if you ever want to talk again, you have my number. So now we're on page 96, right? Do not be discouraged. This is not personal. Them not deciding to work anything is not a reflection on me as a person. It's not that I didn't sell it hard enough. It's not that they don't like me. It's not that my hair didn't look good. It's that they just aren't there. They're not ready. So if your prospect does not respond at once, search out another alcoholic and try again. That's simple. You are sure to find someone desperate enough to accept with eagerness what you offer. Desperation is the key. I want people who are desperate. I want people who are on fire. I want people who are ready and in enough pain to say, it's like, I want somebody who is ready to jump out the third story window of their house because the house is on fire. That's what I want. I don't want the person who's on the first floor going, yeah, but it's up there. Like, it's fine. It's not bothering me. It's a little hot, but like, I'll be okay. Okay, so now we're going to go down. Oh, yeah. So then it says a few lines below that. If you leave such a person alone, he may soon become convinced that he cannot recover by himself. It's my own experience that feeds my willingness, right? I had to come to my first OA meeting, hear what I needed to hear, and then struggle for 2 years to get this to make me willing to do what I needed to do. It was only me. No one could have told me to do that. And in fact, I went to meetings every week with people basically saying I needed to do that, but I wasn't ready to listen to them. I had to be desperate enough and do it myself and go through it myself before I was willing. We have to give people the dignity of their own process. Okay, how are we doing on time? Fine. Okay, so now we're on page 96, second paragraph. Suppose now you are making your second visit to a man. He has read this volume and says he is prepared to go through with the 12 steps of the program of recovery. Hooray, we have someone who's ready to go, right? Having had the experience yourself, you can give him much practical advice. Do you see the prerequisite here? If you're going to help somebody have a spiritual experience, you have to have had one yourself. That's why somebody who just got into this program should not be sponsoring. That's why somebody who's just abstinent should not be sponsoring. They need to work the 12 steps in order to sponsor someone through the 12 steps. If you want to help someone get abstinent, okay, but beyond that, there's not much you can offer them until you've done this yourself. Okay? Let him know you are available if he wishes to make a decision and tell his story, but do not insist upon it if he prefers to consult someone else. I've had sponsees who have broken up with me. I've had sponsors who I've moved on from. It's not personal. It's just the process. Everybody has their process. You know, the sponsor I have now, who I adore, I never would have worked with someone like her when I first got abstinent because at the time I needed somebody who was really hardcore. Now I have my own sort of I don't want to use the word self-discipline, but the way that my system that works. And so now I need somebody who's a little bit more grounded and gentle and balanced and a little more loving than somebody who says, we got to do it like this. I needed that at one point in my life, but I don't need it anymore. But my first sponsor did not take it personally that I decided to move on and work with somebody else. And I have had people say to me straight out, you're not the kind of sponsor I want, or I don't think we're right for each other. Okay, cool. That's fine, because now my time is open again and I can go help somebody else. I don't have time to sit here feeling bad about somebody who doesn't want me to be their sponsor anymore. Okay, so now they go into a whole thing about giving people money, letting them into your house. I have no experience with that. I have had somebody one time, I will say, I shared in a meeting, this is years and years and years ago, that my family, we wanted to fly somewhere. We didn't have money for a ticket, blah, blah, blah. And somebody came up to me after the meeting and said, I'd like to give you money for the ticket. And I said, I don't know if I can pay you back. And she said, oh, that's okay. You may never be able to pay me back. Just help somebody else one day. So I said, okay. So this person gave me money. It was very kind of her. And then about, I don't know, 6 months later, and I paid her back a little bit. And about 6 months later, she said, okay, I need the rest of the money back. And I said, well, that's not what you said. And it became very awkward, just very awkward and weird. I did end up paying back as much as I could. And then unfortunately, she ended up passing away. So the remainder I since gave away to charity. But the point was that, like, unless it's within the structure of a business interaction, like I had an old sponsor who was a real estate agent of mine, like I don't recommend giving money to people who are just getting into programs. I just it's tricky. It's just tricky. Again, this was a different time and place. And I'm sure like with alcoholics who are literally homeless, like there are different circumstances. I've never had experience with anything like that. So you may want to consult somebody else about whether or not you should let people into your home. Quite frankly, I think I'm going to hold by what we read later, but the bottom line here is that we need to be willing to be inconvenienced if we're going to help somebody else. You know, at 7 p.m. when I'm done with my day and I just want to sit in bed and read or just zone out, and my sponsee calls me, I don't really want to talk, but I'm going to pick up the phone. I'm going to be inconvenienced because that's what I need to be doing in order to be studying the message. That's essentially what they're saying here. In general, I don't know a lot of compulsive overeaters who have to deal with the money and people committing suicide in their house, like all that extreme stuff that these people dealt with. I don't see a lot of that in OA. The most important sentence, though, that we're going to get to in this chapter right now, which is on page 98, is that, and I'm just going to read this paragraph because this is the most important thing that I think we need to read today. It is not the matter of giving that is in question, but when and how to give. That often makes the difference between failure and success. The minute we put our work on a service plane, the alcoholic commences to rely upon our assistance rather than upon God. He clamors for this or that, claiming he cannot master alcohol until his material needs are cared for. Nonsense. Some of us have taken very hard knocks to learn this truth. Job or no job, wife or no wife, we simply do not stop drinking so long as we place dependence on other people ahead of dependence on God. Burn the idea into the consciousness of every man that he can get well regardless of anyone. The only condition is that he trust in God and clean house. That's it. Literally it. You can have no money, no house, living in a cardboard box on the street, and you can still get abstinent and have a spiritual experience. You may need to borrow a few bucks to buy a notebook and a pen so that you can write your fourth step. But other than that, that's it. When people say, oh, I need to figure out this first, or I want to see what's going on with my marriage first, you should be making zero decisions about your marriage until you work the 12 steps. It's not about any outside circumstance. And I've been guilty of that. I had sponsors in the beginning who I made my higher powers, and it blew up in my face. I made other people my higher power. I mean, for my entire life, my mother was my higher power. And then she died. And it was like, well, now what? At that point, I had already started trusting and relying on God, but it really kicked the crutch out from under me. It's one of the things I'm actually grateful for about my mother's death is that it forced me to trust and rely more. And it forced me to become more independent and endorse my own decisions and all of those things. Those things are valuable. And it's integral to my own program. I have to trust and rely on God before anything else. Just recently, my main client decided not to continue with the project we're working on. So right now, I have no job. And my first instinct after years of doing this was to say, all right, so you're going to figure out who's coming next, because I have learned that that's how I'm going to survive. Because if I get too caught up in the crazy of oh my God, what am I going to do? Blah, blah, blah. If I get into that head drama, it can kill me, because that's what precipitates me using food, because I'm so uncomfortable in my skin. I need to trust and rely on God first. And by doing that, I don't have to take working with sponsees personally, and I can guide them into showing them how to find that for themselves. The first thing in the first conversation I have with all of my sponsees, I always say to them, my job is to introduce you to your higher power and let you two walk into the sunset together. Okay. I am not interested in you calling me and asking me what you should do with your life. I have opinions, but it doesn't mean anything. It means nothing. Your job is to start. My job is to help facilitate you building a relationship and starting. And then you can cultivate that for the rest of your life, because I'm just a person. I don't know anything. I barely know how to run my own life. So I certainly have nothing to do with running yours. The only thing I do have experience with is how to work these steps. And that is what I'm here to help you with. I'm not your therapist. I'm not your mom. I'm not your bank. I can be a cheerleader sometimes, but only if I feel like it's being supportive and not enabling. It depends on the person. But the idea is that I'm here to show you your God, and that's it. And I've seen lots of sponsorship dynamics where that's not the case, where sponsees aren't even allowed to make any decisions without talking to their sponsor first. I don't agree with that. If a sponsor is doing his or her job, they would say, okay, you have a decision to make. Why don't you go take it to God and write about it and come back to me and see what comes. And then we can discuss it. And if you ask for my opinion, I'm happy to pray about it and give it to you, but that doesn't mean that you should follow it. You have to do what your higher power says. The idea here is that not only are we bringing a message to other people, we are conducting ourselves in a way that shows that this message is true. And it shows people how life looks when we're doing what this book says. On page 99, second paragraph, after they have seen tangible results right? So the people around this person are going to see that he's changing. The family will perhaps want to go along. These things will come to pass naturally and in good time, provided, however, the alcoholic continues to demonstrate that he can be sober, considerate, and helpful, regardless of what anyone says or does. That's the goal. Okay. We are refining ourselves to become sober, considerate, and helpful people, regardless of what's happening out there. That's really hard. It's really hard because there are some real humdingers out there. But the idea is that by trusting and relying, I'm able to become a stable, steady, and sober person, which is the complete opposite of what I used to be. And that's what I can come into people's lives and say, hey, I used to be like this. And you can look on page 52 of this book and it describes me perfectly with the bedevilments. And now I'm like this. So if you want that, let me know. And if you don't, that's okay. You know where to reach me if you change your mind. It's really as simple as that. So I will stop there. Thanks. All right, cool. So let me turn off the recording.